run can of course be beneficial. If I can use you as my slave for a while, even if I would recognize that in the long run I would be better off if you were a free man and I would be a free man and we would cooperate with each other, in the short run, of course, slavery can have certain advantages. And again, it requires, so to speak, a certain development of intelligence, a certain lowering of our time preference, so to speak, in order to be willing to give up this immediate advantage that the institution of slavery might represent. Apart from slavery, of course, the most common form of parasitic behavior is plain crime and robbery and fraud and activities such as those. And again, we can say, of course, that the fact that most people abstain from these type of activities is based on insight, is based on the fact that they realize in the long run these things simply do not pay. If robbery would become, so to speak, a practice, we would all be in terrible shape. And we abstain even from engaging in robbery and fraud, even if we know that in the short run we might be able to get away with it. Again, insight, a certain amount of intelligence, a certain ability to delay gratification is necessary on the part of man in order to give up the temptations that these forms of parasitic behavior might represent. And because of this, because of a certain amount of intelligence and so forth, we have reached a stage where cannibalism has basically disappeared, where slavery has basically disappeared, and where fraud and robbery have become rare events conducted by just some few asocial individuals, and most people abstain from it. So civilization is maintained by rational insight, by having developed a certain state of intelligence and having lowered our time preference to a certain degree. And again, a quote to this effect by Mises, and then I will really come to the problem of the origin of the state, as I promised. Mises says here, one may admit that in primitive men the propensity for killing and destroying and the disposition for cruelty were innate. We may also assume that under the conditions of earlier ages the inclination for aggression and murder was favorable to the preservation of life. Man was once a brutal beast, but one must not forget that he was physically a weak animal. He would not have been a match for the big beasts of prey if he had not been equipped with a peculiar weapon, reason. The fact that man is a reasonable being, that he therefore does not yield without inhibitions to every impulse, but arranges his conduct according to reasonable deliberation, must not be called unnatural from a zoological point of view. Rational conduct means that man, in face of the fact that he cannot satisfy all his impulses, desires, and appetites, forgoes the satisfaction of those which he considers less urgent. In order not to endanger the working of social cooperation, man is forced to abstain from satisfying those desires whose satisfaction would hinder establishment of societal institutions. There is no doubt that such a renunciation is painful. However, man has made his choice. He has renounced the satisfaction of some desires incompatible with social life and has given priority to the satisfaction of those desires which can be realized only or in a more plentiful way under a system of the division of labor. This decision is not irrevocable and final. The choice of the fathers does not impair the sons' freedom to choose. They can reverse the resolution. Every day they can proceed to the transvaluation of values and prefer barbarism to civilization, or, as some authors say, the soul to the intellect, myth to reason, and violence to peace. But they must choose. It is impossible to have things incompatible with one another. Now this fact that mankind has, by and large, developed the sufficient reason to engage in cooperation and build a society has also led, on the other hand, of course, to the temptation of creating a system of institutionalized exploitation or institutionalized parasitism, or as some people have referred to it as stationary banditry. That is, only if, insofar as we have a rich society in front of us, does the temptation arise for some people to take advantage of the wealth that society has accumulated and institute a system where they can systematically benefit themselves at the expense of the great masses of productive individuals. And this brings me to the institution of the state. And let me begin by giving you a definition of what the state is, a definition that is more or less uncontroversial, that you find adopted by practically everyone who talks about this institution. And this definition of the state is that a state is defined as an organization or an agency that exercises a territorial monopoly of ultimate jurisdiction or of ultimate judgeship or of ultimate arbitration in cases of conflict. In particular, it is an institution that is also the ultimate judge in cases of conflicts involving itself with other people in society. And as a second element of the definition, which is in a way already implied in the first one, the state is an organization that exercises a territorial monopoly of taxation. That is, it can determine unilaterally, without the consent of others, how much the inhabitants of a territory have to pay to the agency of the state for the state providing this service of being the ultimate judge and arbitrator in the territory. Now, you immediately recognize from this definition that it is not difficult to explain why people might be motivated to create an institution such as a state. Just imagine what that means. It means that whenever you have conflicts with each other, you must come to me and I settle the conflict, and I tell you then what you owe me for this settlement without receiving or having your consent doing this. This is, of course, a magnificent position to be in. And even better is the